And all this because you're different, because people see you as something different. You're not
Because I
doing the
was a good kid
traditional.
in school. I was always an A student. I was polite. I played the piano. I studied English and French and painting and sketching. By all accounts, I was a model child, fortunately or unfortunately. But this one thing canceled everything else.
And you were just being yourself, like
I
how
didn't
you
even
were
know
born.
that.
Yeah,
I was
right. You're
just,
just
it was like, I'm not doing anything for the sake of doing it. I'm just me. But, you know,
How did you overcome that process where you were suicidal and that when you felt that you were unlovable, or what was the beginning of a change? And
years of therapy.
but did it have to do, like, when you left your hometown, did it help, or that was something you were doing before leaving?
That was the first step. Because, I mean, it was so bad that even when my mom left, which now looking back, my mom left Iran to find a place for me. But my parents were so shell-shocked that they didn't even sit down with me and say, this is what we're doing. I just came home one day and my mom's luggage was at the door. Which now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like how did we not imagine that all of these things were making things worse? But then when I was like, oh, you're leaving, it wasn't until I left that I was like, okay, that was the first thing.
So where did she leave to?
My mom first left to go to England because that's
Okay.
where my parents had lived from 1969 to 75. My brother was born there.
Okay.
So that was kind of like the more familiar destination.
Okay.
But then I kept failing the immigration interview because at that time they're like, we can give you a 6 months visa. And I'm like, 6 months visa to do what? Like you can have your surgery and then go back. Like that's not how this works. So I failed 2 interviews. And at that time, there were no provisions for asylum for gay and lesbian in England. So then, as a last resort, my mom came to the States. Both my uncles had lived here from the late 70s, early 80s. So she came here, and it's kind of like, the universe has plans for you. You just don't know it until you kind of fall into it. And then she started working for a small company that one of them had. And so she got an O visa. And because I was under 21, I could get a dependent visa. And then I came. And then at that time, we thought, oh, my mom's going to get her green card and then I will. And then I just happened to meet this immigration lawyer who specifically dealt with immigration for the queer community. And then I got my asylum through him, having to basically detail all the things that happened from bullying in school to not being able to address it because I was afraid of all the other things that could happen to me. And things slowly started coming together my first year in New York. I mean, it was hard. New York can be a very unforgiving place when you first move in, especially if you come from a warmer place and you get into that New York fall and winter and you don't have the right clothes. And it's like,
they know a little bit.
We know a couple of things about it.
Yeah.
and you don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you don't know anyone. And I just remember that first year in New York looked very great to me. But then I got my asylum. I started therapy. I started my transition. And it was just, it took years. I mean, it's 27 and a half years since I moved to New York. And it wasn't just therapy. It was also being in spaces that were safe spaces for other people who were also, and I had never experienced that before. I remember when that first fall, I think it may have been like September, October, I found my way to this high school for LGBTQ kids called the Hedrick Martin. And I go there, and so there are all of these queer kids at this high school, and they put on this film called Ma vie en rose, My Life in Pink. And I had never seen anything about a trans child. I cried through the whole thing. And I think the first 2 years of therapy, I just cried. I was having 3 different therapy and counseling sessions a week at 3 different places. And I just cried. The things that had happened to me. And it was through that I just started knowing me. The me that wasn't always on guard. And, going through school, okay, I'm a little more solid now. I went through 1 semester. I've had a little more therapy. Oh, there are other people that I can talk to that I'm not going to be afraid of. And there was a lot of falling and getting up and falling and getting up and still finding myself in situations that, looking back, I'm like, they may not have been the safest situations all the time. But I always look back on it, I'm like, I survived the Islamic Republic of Iran. The rest of the world, get in line. Like, I don't know what you think you're going to do. And that kind of, I think that chapter of my life went through university, even though there were a lot of microaggressions. Like, I was in the theater ensemble, but then I realized that whenever they wanted to hire an actor for a play and he was going to play opposite me, they would have to have a talk with him. Well, we have a trans actor. Are you comfortable with that? But no one ever asked me. Or I was doing background work and then someone outed me on set. And that led to me getting dropped by the agency that used to represent me for background work, which then just cut off any background work, because it wasn't like now that there are all of these websites. It was an actual physical agency that you went to, and I didn't know any other. And or when I wanted to join the model forum, at FIT, because I was young, I was kind of cute. And
You are kind of cute.
well, I was cute and dumb. That was the thing. And the head of the fashion department, this extremely elegant woman, looks at me from across the street and she's like, I can't let you join because that would make the other girls uncomfortable. So, but considering what I was used to before that, I was like, well, this is not great, but livable. Now, those things would not be allowed to happen. Like, that woman would get sued. Or that person who outed me on set, the way that he did it, that would have, ramifications. But back then, it was, I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to attract any more attention than was necessary, because then that would lead to more people finding out. And that gets to, what back then passing meant. Are you familiar with the term passing? It's not just for trans people, but before that it was for people of color or women who tried to pass as men so they could have access to education, kind of Yentl, like what she's trying to do. Or African American families that were light enough in color that they would then try to pass as white, so then they could move into certain neighborhoods or be able to go to university. Or so that concept, like, the trans community didn't invent it, but at that time, this terminology was so important in the community. Because if you passed, that meant that if people didn't know you were trans,
you could get along with certain things.
Then maybe you could get a certain job that you couldn't otherwise. Maybe somebody wouldn't chase you down the street. And this was a real thing. Like if somebody, and this was early in transition, so if somebody could clock you, and that meant that if somebody could figure out that you were trans, then I remember this guy like chasing me down 8th Avenue, block after block, and propositioning me, he and his buddy, these very vulgar things. And now I can look back and I'm like, well, that was kind of cute. At the time, I felt unsafe
Of course.
because people were getting killed.
Mm.
I could pass, which meant that I could get a job, which meant that I got bullied less than other people.
Yeah.
But I also had this issue that I transitioned while I was going to the same university. So almost everybody knew. And if somebody new came along that didn't know, other people made sure they knew.
Oh.
Of course.
So it's like all of those microaggressions, they're like, why are people depressed? Why do they try to commit suicide? It's like when you realize, I remember there was this really fancy club. I think it was called the Culture Club. It was downtown.
Mm-hmm.
I think now there's one in Midtown, but this was the one downtown. And, I was in my third or fourth year of transition. So I was thinking, it's like, I'm rocking it. The hair is working and the dresses are working. Yes. And the drugs were good. What I didn't know was that the bouncer at this club somehow knew about me. I had never spoken to him, but he would take it upon himself to warn people about me, warn people like I was some scary, terrifying thing. And I didn't know about this until one night, some guy who I later found out he was like some, big guy from, I don't know, the New York Giants or something, like some big New York sports team. He had been interested in me and he was eyeing me. And then the bouncer knew who he was and he had taken it upon himself to, guide him, enlighten him. And so then this guy came and started dancing with me. And then, I was dancing and, it was like the club atmosphere. And my girlfriend was there. And then I saw him talking to her, which I didn't care. I was having a great time. And then she comes to me and she's like, he has a question for you. And I'm like, yeah. Because I thought like he was going to say something really awesome. I mean, this really good looking hunk of guy. It's like, he wants to know about your gender. And it's like, the best way, it's like a John Hughes movie that, you've borrowed a dress from somebody and you're feeling really pretty. And then somebody tells you, oh no, she's the janitor's child. Like that kind of high school vibe. And it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. And the fact that this other person that I don't know takes it upon himself to warn these people about me, like I'm gonna cause some harm.
Yeah.
And so, well, the night kind of like went down from there. And then we were there at the end as they were closing up and we come out and I couldn't talk to the guy because I couldn't hold myself. I just felt so broken. And he's talking to me, he's like, do you want to, because he still wanted to like go out with me. He's like, can I take you to have a burger with me right now? And I was with my friends. And at that moment, I felt like I needed the safety of my friends. And I told him, I said, I want to be with my friends right now. But if you want to go out with me, well, you can ask me out. And then he said, I can't go out with you. Because if anybody in the media finds out that I'm going out with you, they will roast me. And these are huge concepts to want to deal with at 23. So that was my life. And then came this guy who later became my husband, who later became my ex-husband. And the only reason I was so receptive to him in my life, I don't think it was love. It was desperation.
Mhm.
It was, I needed to feel somewhere where I could feel safe, that I wasn't going to be judged. And well, when you approach something that way, what you're going to get isn't going to be that good. So then that relationship at that time felt like the right thing. And then I was seeing all the really bad red flags along the way, which I was more than willing to just, not look at and pay attention to. And I moved in with him knowing all of this stuff, but I was determined. I was going to move into the city, hell or high water. This was going to happen. I was going to, I'm like, you've heard the story of my life up to this point. It's like, I'm like, I am going to make this happen. This is going to happen. There's just no other way. This is how it's going to be. And so we moved in together. I had my surgery. Even our relationship around that, which within the world of what was happening in my life at that time, and I was having this hugest event in my life, which was the surgery at 25. And the way it was all happening, I don't wish that on anybody, the way that it happened for me. But still after that, we were together and we got separated and we got back together and we got married. And I wanted to get married because I had something to prove to society. I'm like, see how much of a woman I am? I can get married. And I did. And well, when you go into something with all of those ideas, I mean, like, how good do you think it's going to turn out? So then a few months after getting married, we got separated and we got back together for a month, and then we got separated for good after some really bad things happened. And then I filed for divorce. And I think the new me kind of like came to life through that marriage. It's this idea that I always say it and I hold to it very tightly. Iron becomes steel through lots of pressure and lots of heat. So I am steel now.